Okay, Scott, now it's time for our predictions. I'm going to do mine first. I think Donald Trump's age might become an issue in the next 2 years. I think the presidency is an incredibly difficult thing. I do think it might be calmer, and it's largely not because he's become wiser, because he's not. He's not wise in any way. He's not a good person. He's a serial sexual harasser at the very least, and other things. I think he's a terrible person. I think his age is going to calm him down. I don't know how else to put it, either through natural, what happens when you get older, and the difficulties of this. So you may see a calmer Donald Trump. You may see it, and it's not because he's a good person or he's turning the tide or anything else. He also is probably looking at his legacy now, and he's a lame duck president. No matter how you slice it, he's a lame duck president. And again, people around him are aware of it. I've heard it from so many people in his party. We only need him for a couple more years. They've said it. And then we'll make him into an icon. We'll do some statues, all good. And so I think it's going to maybe a little surprising, and it's not because he's a good person. As to my other prediction, I do think there's going to be a lot more advantage to companies in AI that you aren't thinking of, like IBM, Salesforce, a lot of the others that are going to ride on the rails of the enormous spending that, whether it's $30 billion from Meta, whether it's 50 to 80 billion from Microsoft, or all of them are spending. I think those who ride the rails on these things are going to be the beneficiaries that put them into place, whether you're Salesforce helping Disney with its lines, that's one of their clients, or IBM, or things like that. So I would look to those companies in a lot of ways who are going to be the real beneficiaries. It reminds me of the early internet. It was not the companies that put up the websites like Netscape, It was the companies that rode the rails. And these rails are being put in place not by our government, but by companies, and they're getting paid for, whether it's energy costs, everything else. So I would look to those companies in 2025. I think the AI revolution is just getting started, and it will start to really, it reminds me of early internet, and who began and who succeeded were two very different parties. On to you, Scott Galloway.
I like those. So briefly, 2025 will be the year of a new duopoly. It'll be OpenVidya. OpenAI and NVIDIA right now control arguably 90% of all traffic in AI, 90% of the queries, 90% of the queries of the processors that are powering those. Answers to those queries are those two firms, and so it'll be kind of the new Wintel, and people will start referring to it as the most powerful duopoly in the world. We haven't seen, I think we're going to see a bunch of raft of new unicorns in the application layer of AI. We have the infrastructure layer, we have the LLMs themselves, but every innovation or new technology creates a bunch of interesting consumer applications. I think you're going to see a raft of new unicorns in healthcare, where you upload your medical records, your diet, and it starts playing offense and comes back to you with exact. I told you for the first time, I was diagnosed with high blood pressure 2.5 months ago. I went into AI. I uploaded my urine, my blood work, my fecal work. I talked very openly about my diet, and it came back with a series of recommendations. And I took them to heart, and I no longer have high blood pressure. And I think that's going to be systemized, routinized, and create a bunch of interesting applications around fitness, healthcare, especially I think around travel. There's a huge opportunity. I upload all of my credit card bills, all my past travel, my calendar, and it starts proactively saying, Scott, we see that you're going to be in LA for this meeting. We're going to book you here. You should do this. You should go see your dad. You should do this. I've already organized the flight.
What do you upload to? OpenAI?
Well, so for example, I took my MRIs on my shoulders and I uploaded it to OpenAI, and I said, please diagnose this and tell me what I should be doing, what stretching I should be doing. And it comes back with a whole list of things. I mean, you can upload a board deck. I'll give you an example, Kara.
Yeah.
We're out in the marketplace potentially thinking about our next 4 years. I uploaded our deck that we put together on summarizing our business, and I basically said, what is the likely deal we will get and what should we be thinking about? I mean, this shit is so powerful. And instead of having smart people prompt, people are going to build a thin layer of innovation.
We would call someone in that case, and it's like calling your smart friend. Yeah, interesting.
Wow. But it'll be proactive. It'll say, okay, here's the new AI-enabled travel, and Expedia is going very hard at this.
Yeah.
And I just say, it just starts sending me text alerts saying, oh, we see you have this coming up. This is this is your travel itinerary and what we're thinking. Here are the decisions I need from you.
Huh. You know, you just said Expedia. I think they're a ride the rails company too. They're going to benefit. Anyway, they don't have to pay
I think
for it.
so.
Ride the rails. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think so. So anyways, software, basically SaaS goes from software as a service to service as a software. That's where I kind of see my prediction for AI. Podcasts, this is going to be the breakout year of podcasts because this election just illuminated what is going to be an enormous transfer of capital from the political spending machine, and that is they used to spend a ton of money on local broadcast TV stations because those were voters, i.e. old people were. And what they realize is where you go for voters is podcasts. And if you can go on one podcast and get the equivalent listenership of going on CNN, MSNBC, or Fox every night during primetime for 3 hours for a week by going on one podcast, you're just going to see in the amount of capital it's drawing, the means of production are less expensive, so creators make more money, which is drawing in more human capital. 47% of people have listened to a podcast in the last 30 days versus less than 10%. 15 years ago. I mean, the medium is going to boom. And Kara, I don't know, I'm sure you're getting the same calls. I have all of these political candidates reaching out to me, asking me for my views on things, which means I am running for something and I want to come on your podcast.
I have had four U.S. senators write me, both recently, text me this week. It was crazy. Yeah. Can I come on your podcast?
And I say to them the following thing.
Several governors.
I say to them, you're ambitious and you're running for something. That's fine for me. 100%. But don't pretend you want to talk to me about policy.
Right. Yeah.
Anyways, this and podcast revenue in 2025 is going to grow faster, granted off a small base, than Meta or Alphabet or Amazon. It's going to be up 20+%. The CPMs, it's a better consumer. It's a 34-year-old versus a 7-year-old. It's much more impactful because we do host readovers. People go to cable news to sanctify their beliefs. People go to podcasts to learn. And also there's a vibe about podcasts where we try and present people in their best light. And it's quite frankly, it's just a little bit more pleasant. It's not as antagonistic. So IPO of the year, I think it's going to be an interesting one because it's probably going to have on the London Exchange. Shein, these light models, and disclosure, I'm an investor, but if you look at Airbnb versus Marriott, it needs a third of the employees for the same revenue. If you look at Zara, they're doing about $400,000 per employee versus Shein's at $2 million per employee. If you look at Uber versus the car manufacturers, these asset light, all IP intensive versus CapEx intensive companies, Shein doesn't own a single truck, factory, warehouse, store. It's all software driven. And this year it's bigger than Amazon retail in apparel, and next year it's going to pass Walmart to be the biggest apparel retailer in the world, and it's going public on the London Exchange. I think for a lot of reasons that's going to quote unquote be the IPO of the year. I think the technology of the year is nuclear. You just saw Facebook basically put out an RFP saying, build us a nuclear power plant. The friction in AI is energy. It requires 10 times the energy. And people have realized that it's one of the safest, most productive, most reliable sources of energy. It's just been terribly branded the last 20 or 30 years. But some of the biggest brains have turned their massive capital fire hoses on nuclear. 2025 is going to be the year of nuclear. That'll be the technology of the year. And the substance of the year is testosterone, and that is this election was supposed to be a referendum on women's rights. It wasn't. It was a referendum on how poorly young people are doing, specifically young males. And I think we're having a more honest and open conversation around the attributes around masculinity and the struggles of young men. I think that's come to the fore, and Trump flying into the manosphere was a direct one of the fundamental reasons he was able to win the election. I think if you look at the election, who swung most violently away from blue to red, it was people under the age of 30 and women 45 to 64, who I speculate are their mothers. I think mothers and young people are really hit hard by young people not doing as well, and they just don't have the luxury of thinking about some of the other social issues when their kids aren't doing well.
No. So once again, the penis. Once again.
Well, what I would argue is I think people are coming to the conclusion that women will not continue to flourish, nor will the country flourish. And on a much more boring level, I think the biggest LBOs in history are going to happen in 2025. There's so much capital on the sidelines. And my favorite two targets are Target and Intel.
Anything else?
That's all I got, Kara. I think it's going to be a great year for us. I think it's going to be a nice year.
Is there going to be vacation for us together or some?
No, you don't want a vacation with me. I don't want a
conscious
vacation. You got
coupling?
5 kids. You got like 100 kids. I don't want babies.
I have 100 kids. I have 100 of them. Yeah, some of Elon's kids are now my kids because they don't like him. No, I'm kidding.